My name's Shaz Rahman and I'm here representing Community Energy Birmingham, which is basically an energy cooperative based in Birmingham that has previously put solar panels on community buildings and is now about to launch a home energy advice service. But I'm also part of several other community cooperatives as well. So I've been to Co-op Congress a few times, maybe this is my fourth or fifth time. I've been to the one in Birmingham before, and what happened last time was there were no Birmingham co-ops featured at all. There was only one in attendance, on a formal level. So I represented Central Co-op because they're a large retail society and they could afford to fund these kind of places where the small community scale, like Community Energy Birmingham, for example, can't afford to fund basically like £200 or £300 for something like this. And so what I did after the Congress 2 years ago, when it was here in Birmingham, was I provided some feedback to say that having Congress in Birmingham was an amazing thing because this is a great place, but there's like 20 or 30 different co-ops that could have been featured and not a single one was. So then they listened to that feedback and they invited me here as a speaker. So I'm speaking on a panel about energy and part of Community Energy Birmingham. And there are a few other co-ops from Birmingham who are being featured, but I'd still say there should be more. And so as part of my role, I'll be on a panel tomorrow, and I'm also here talking to the other co-ops, so Co-op Press and Central Co-op and Co-op Group. So it's a big networking opportunity, really. It's like a conference. This is for the co-op sector, for like the professional co-op sector. So the problem with very hierarchical societies and structures is that unless you're given certain advantages, it's very, very hard for you to basically get up that ladder in that hierarchy. So the backgrounds of, say, CEOs of PLCs, they tend to be engineers, they tend to have MBAs, they tend to basically come from similar backgrounds and similar schools. Now, those people are perfectly good at that job, but if it requires you to have that certain background to get to that level, in 90% of cases, then that's not a meritocracy. That's not a society where actually it should be about, can you do that job, rather than lots of factors that support you in getting there. And so there's nothing wrong with having people from a background achieving success, but it is a problem if it's at the expense of everybody else. I'd say the biggest challenge is the capacity, but then there's a secondary challenge. Basically, people don't know what co-ops are outside of this very narrow room that we're in now. And whilst the co-op movement is getting stronger and more well known because of the way society is moving, it's still 90% of people, 95% of people won't know what a co-op is, apart from they'll probably recognise the supermarkets. Cooperatives generally are quite a middle class, not endeavour, but basically to be involved in a cooperative, say Birmingham Zero for Artifact, you need to have a job, you need to have cultural capital that allows you the material ability to have, volunteer 5 to 10 hours aside from whatever you're doing in your job or your family life. And you need to basically have a stable income. On the other scale, at the higher end with the Co-op Group and the Central Co-ops of the world, it's different because they're fully employed organisations, and so the challenges there are very different. But I'd say it's about trying to get these models which are quite very common across the world. So, if you go to India, mostly brown people in India, the co-ops are a minority organisation, but there are co-ops and they're run by mostly brown people. You go to Jackson, Mississippi, and the co-op still set there by black people, based out of desperation because of poverty. So it's not as if these cooperative structures can't be used by anybody. It's just that I think because of the history of the co-op movement started out of basically trying to have a new way of working, but the people who started that new way of working were relatively well off, considering the circumstances. So you had to pay £1 to become a member of the Rochdale Pioneers, and £1 at that time was quite a lot of money. So whilst the Rochdale Pioneers came out of basically a difficult situation and wanted to improve their lives, to be able to join it in the first place, you had to have some capital behind you. And so I feel that in modern society, you need to have that similar capital to be able to get into it. And if it's not something that you've been introduced to through work, how would you find out about it? For example, very common in Asian households or British Asian households to have multiple generations living in the same house. And the power dynamic of that, obviously there's still a hierarchy in one sense, but it's much more common to share resources and to basically have people living in the same situation to have shared experiences, whereas elsewhere in society, maybe, the children move out pretty early and then they have separate lives, whereas it's very common in, say, British Asian households to have like the tight-knit community, and that's not a power structure that says, we've signed a form saying that we have one member, one vote, but there is definitely a shared bond there. So, you don't have to go to an Indian wedding to see, it's like a 5-day festival of lots of people who necessarily don't see each other very often, but have a shared community bond. And those are the kind of things that the cooperative movement hasn't really been able to do. Is that obviously a cooperative on a piece of paper has some good principles, but if you don't know how to apply them, then nobody will ever use them. The answer is education, but not in the vague sense, in a very structured, formal sense. So, for example, cooperatives aren't taught in schools as a way of doing business or even a way of dealing with other people. They're not taught in universities. They're not taught in any actual formal way. So I found out about cooperatives quite randomly. Maybe if I went and worked in my local co-op, that would be different, but I didn't. I just found out about them, and because I had interest in a similar ideology that matched the co-op movements, I found it. And so the co-op movement is lobbying on this, but it's obviously a long game. So if more people, and that isn't really about ethnicity in itself, the same would apply to gender as that, and disability and people of different sexes, is that if they knew about it in a form way and knew it was an opportunity, more people would be likely to go for it. So if it was taught in schools, for example, then people would know it's a legitimate form or way of having a structure of an organisation, as is a PLC or as is a charity. So that's obviously a broad societal problem that I think needs to be solved. But I'd say the best way is to get it in the formal structure. So teach it as a part of the business degrees at university, teach it at A-levels, teach it in schools. It is getting better. So, for example, maybe 10% of people involved are black or brown, or at least not white, whereas when I did start, it was like, I probably might be like one of 4 out of a room of like 150 people. So it is moving in the right direction, and more younger people are going to cooperatives, not because of the ideology of, it's good because I'm being oppressed in an obvious way, because they don't make that connection because they're not taught about it, but they're looking for a solution, and they'll try 7 solutions, and then they'll find out that cooperatives is one that has a good record of working. So